to $59,603, and also Dogecoin steadied around 54 cents. In the United States now, Federal Reserve officials grappled with April's surprisingly weak employment growth, maintaining faith in the year's economic rebound, but acknowledging the pace of the job recovery may just prove choppier than anticipated. In the auto sector, Ford Motor Corporation has also recalled 661,000 Explorer sport utility vehicles in North America at the request of U.S. regulators because retention pins can loosen and also allow roof rail covers to detach from the vehicle. Well, it's now time to bring you special packages by our correspondents. In this first report, the Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, inaugurated an 11-man panel of inquiry to probe the management of the Nigerian Ports Authority. The inauguration is in compliance with a presidential directive, which, among other things, will examine and also investigate the procurement of contracts in the parastatal from the year 2016 till date. TVC News correspondent Habib Lawal reports.
The suspension of the managing director of the Nigerian Port Authority, Hadiza Bala Usman, is speculated to have unsettled certain interest in the presidency. Hadiza Usman was asked to step aside to make way for an administrative panel that will examine the books of the agency. Hadiza Bala Usman is the first female managing director of the country's port services. She was first appointed in July 2016 at the age of 41 years to steer the affairs of one of the most strategic parastatals in Nigeria and the gateway to national wealth in terms of revenue generation. Although the presidency, which ordered the suspension, gave no reason for its action, media reports indicate it has to do with the alleged non-remittance of 165.3 billion naira surplus of the NPA into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Hadiza Usman has responded to these claims and insists all audited certified surpluses were remitted into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. The inquiry panel, charged with examining issues leading to determination of pilotage and contract of NPA, will also confirm compliance with the terms of contract, court rulings and presidential directive.
We had no choice but to do proper inquiry. It worries me that people are saying we shouldn't inquire. Nobody has been indicted. It's just, can we know what is going on in NPA? That's the question. But we want to find out the processes and how that money, how the money was spent and all that.
The panel is headed by the Director of Maritime Services, Suleiman Hawalu, and co-chaired by Ben Omogo from the Head of Service of the Federation.
We are going to be honest and fair in the discharge of this onerous responsibility, so that at the end of the day, when we turn on our report, it will be good and it will ensure that what is praised, what the panels were raised was achieved, and I believe we are going to do in the interest of the ministry, of the country as a whole.
President Muhammadu Buhari had suspended Hadiza Bala Usman through a statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President of Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu. The statement said the President also approved the recommendation of the Ministry of Transportation for the setting up of an administrative panel of inquiry to investigate the management of the NPA.
In its next report now, rice processors have asked the authorities to urgently check smugglers whose activities may affect the impact of the existing production incentives. They made this call against the backdrop of the directive by the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions that the customs return smuggled rice seized from traders in Ibadan. Lara Folayo reports.
On Tuesday, May 4th, the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions asked the customs to return foreign rice and cash it seized from rice traders in Ibadan. The committee feels the customs was wrong to have confiscated the commodity packed in various shops by traders.
Yes, we have had.
These rice processors are unhappy with this directive. They feel it's a contradiction to the country's efforts at encouraging local production.
You embolden the smugglers. What will happen? They will now do it with the hope that they will still go back to the Senate to get a reprieve. And we are calling on the Senate Committee on Public Petition to look at it again from an economic prism, to look at it from the fact that Nigerians have invested, to look at it from the fact that these investments are creating jobs, to look at it from the fact that these investments are paying taxes to the Nigerian government.
The processors feel it is a ploy to support smuggling of rice into the country, which is insensitive to the plight of local investors. To them, smuggling remains a major challenge to rice processing in Nigeria, as the smugglers connive with their agents in Benin, Cameroon and Niger to illegally bring in what they call unhealthy rice from Asia into the country.
India, Thailand, all these people that try to dump rice into our country have been in rice production for more than 50, 60 years. And it is proven that India sometimes would shut down some production sites simply because the rice is too much.
The rice processors fear this development can shut down their businesses, leading to unemployment and worsening poverty if not quickly addressed. The rice processors also complain that existing intervention efforts by government has limited reach and would want them expanded so more players can benefit.
India is giving 70 million farmers access to this, and there are maybe 75 million farmers. You can see the difference. In Nigeria, we have 6 million, 7 million farmers, and only less than 500,000 are getting access.
And with those reports now, we delve into the feature of the show today, bringing into perspective matters regarding maritime logistics with a particular focus on barge operations in Nigeria, the trends in the sector, amid the call for aggressive regulatory reinforcement. We have details of this conversation and much more after this break. Many thanks for still staying with us. Now let's deal with the crux of the matter of today's discourse. Barge operators in Nigeria are intensifying the call on government to tackle the menace of illegal barge operations in the country. There are growing concerns in the growing number of barge accidents and the attendant container losses on the waterways to substandard barges and jetties. Considering that Nigeria's 8,600-kilometer inland waterways stretches from Lagos to Port Harcourt and even up to the north, the need for regulatory oversight function to ensure seamless and effective cargo movement along the transport chains, reduce costs, as well as facilitate trade, hinged on the back of inter-agency collaborative partnerships to drive programs and projects that would change the nation's logistic chain, cannot be overemphasized. Well, joining me now to discuss the trends we've had in the barge sector in Nigeria and much more, I have the president of the Barge Operators of Nigeria, Edeme Kelekume. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Let's start our discussion with the trend that barge operations are changing the face of Nigeria's maritime logistics. In Lagos, for example, the country's bustling commercial hub is home to two of the busiest ports. We have the Lagos Port Complex and the Tinkan Island Port Complex, with a bigger promise of also opening up opportunities along the eastern waterways. In the trends and practices observed so far in recent times, what's acceptable and what's not, from conversations around insurance policy, looking at the fact that we've had a whole lot of accidents and the perceived notion of oversaturation or an influx of foreign participants?
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your program. You've mentioned three very key important things regarding what is acceptable and what is not in this emerging, growing barge industry. You've talked about insurance, you've talked about foreign players, you've talked about, I think you talked about accidents on the waterways. I'll start with insurance. So as a body, one, we
have finalized, we're almost finalized a type of group insurance policy for all our assets that are operating on the waterway. So this covers the goods, this covers the crafts, this also covers third parties that you would occasionally have issues with on the waterways. This is very important because the value of the cargo that is being moved on the waterway is quite significant. And every single item you see on the waterway is quite expensive. So insurance plays a very key and a vital role for operations, which is why we encourage as much as possible all players in the space to come under the umbrella of one so that that policy covers all players that are in the sector. On the issue of accidents, it's quite unfortunate that we've had some recent mishaps, which fortunately were not members of our association, where mostly quack operators that just jump on the waterways, and you begin to ask yourself, how did they get access into the ports to load their cargo? How did they get jetties approval to be able to operate? These are issues that we're engaging with the relevant authorities, particularly the Nigerian Port Authority and Nigerian Inland Waterways Authority, as well as NIMASA. We're all working together to see how we can clean up the system. Things have been a bit slow lately, but we believe that in coming weeks, with the policies being put in place in terms of ensuring that the right quality of equipment is deployed on the waterways, in terms of ensuring that all craft have the right certification, all crewmen have the right certification on board, every marine equipment that is being plied on the waterway to carry out the trade of moving cargo to and from the port. You also mentioned the issue of an influx of foreign operators. Yes, this is a big concern for local operators because the foreign operators come with a lot of financial capacity. We're operating in an environment today where the banks don't even understand what we're talking about. So there's hardly any local operator, maybe very few, that have access to banking facilities. It's a new and emerging sector, so it will take a while for the banks to catch up before you can have access to fund. Even when you have access to funding, you are talking about interest rates of about 24% and above. How can you compete with somebody who is coming with a 0% or maybe less than 5% interest rate? It becomes very difficult to be able to compete with such operators. They also have the capacity in terms of manpower. They're able to deploy people as quickly and very quickly. So we're looking more at collaborations. We're not saying, I mean, we have Nigerian companies operating globally in different environments. We're not saying that this is exclusively for Nigerian companies, but where foreign companies want to play in the cabotage space, they need to identify the right local partners that they can work with, thereby transferring skills, building capacity for the local partners, and also empowering the local partners.
Let's now touch a little more on the cabotage policy we have operating in the country and how this works to benefit barge operations in Nigeria.
Okay, cabotage currently is domiciled, is being managed largely by NIMASA. We've had discussions with the director of cabotage at NIMASA, who was giving absolute support to what we are doing. From the point of view of NIMASA, the whole barging operation is purely a cabotage operation. I mean, it falls 100% within the space of cabotage. The vessels that we're using are Nigerian-built vessels in the Niger Delta. The people that are manning these vessels are purely Nigerians. The owners of these vessels are Nigerians. So it's a purely cabotage operations. Recently, the government has granted approval for some level of some kind of disbursement on the cabotage fund that has been in place for a while now. And we're glad to announce that we're making progress in working with NIMASA to see how we can get our members to access this funding. With this low interest fund, it empowers local operators to be able to, number one, operate at the global best practice. Number two, improve skill development. We're operating in an environment where there's a bit of a dearth in terms of skill. So we're looking at empowering our members to be able to shore up their capacity in terms of skill development. NIMASA also is doing a lot in terms of providing skilled personnel. We've had discussions with them, and they have a pool of people, Nigerians also operating in the cabotage space, that they are looking at transferring some of those people to work with various organizations that are currently operating barge operations. So cabotage is very welcome, and we believe that if applied right, if the funds are disbursed right, if NIMASA does not just disbursement of funds, but also monitoring to ensure that funds that are being disbursed are applied in the right direction, there will be significant ripple effect across the entire ecosystem.
In March of this year, the Nigeria Shippers Council, we had the Nigerian Ports Authority and the National Inland Waterways Authority also set up a committee to formulate modalities for the regulation of barge operations in the country. How do you think this develops a robust oversight function to checkmate the menace of illegal barge operations and also ensure strict compliance in terms of rules of engagement?
I think it's still very early in the day. We've had one or two engagements with the committee that has been set up. We expect more engagement with the committee. We expect that there'll be more collaboration between us, the barge operators, and the committee. You cannot regulate a sector in isolation of the members of the sector. Okay, that's a problem point. So we need to work with them. They need to understand a little bit more what we are doing. For the past 3 years, Nigerians have invested significantly. I can tell you that a number of people have lost their shirts in this business. It's capital intensive, it's very dynamic, it's very risky. So, you're operating at very thin margins, and the slightest mistake, you're out of it. So we've borne the brunt so far, and regulators are coming on board now to see how they can put a framework in place so that the industry is more structured, is more sustainable, and is more organized. But in doing that, they definitely need the experience, they need the support, they need the understanding of the operators so that we can work together to create an enabling environment for business. Because at the end of the day, you want something that is sustainable so that generations down the line, barging, which is a very key component of the global architecture in the maritime space, in the logistics space, becomes a very key pillar for intermodalism, for multimodalism in the logistics space in Nigeria.
How critical would you now say it is to get things right on time in terms of irregularities in barge operations, ranging from the specifications to loading, insurance policies, and also night patrol operations, among many other things? The quest for sanitizing operations cannot be overemphasized, looking at the menace of unseaworthy barges and also jetties.
The terminal operators play a very key and fundamental role in ensuring safety and sustainability of the industry. Today, the terminal operators are not doing well enough. A few of them started very well, gave a lot of support to barging industry, but there's been a lot of changes in recent months, which is not very encouraging. Some terminals now impose very huge levies, as much as 20 million naira that should be deposited with these terminals before a barge operator can call the jetties. A barge is not different from a truck. It's just to come and pick up a container. So I think such anti-progressive measures should not be encouraged. You have some terminals who are insisting that you must come with an import containers. You must have import containers to pick up before you can bring in your export cargo to the port. We are operating in an environment today where the government has clearly recognized the fact that the days for dependence on oil by the Nigerian government is numbered. And we're looking for the new oil, and that is export. So we have a lot of commodities that have been exported from the country, yet some terminals are not given the right support to encourage exports into the country. Every import we receive today into the country is an export from some other country. So there must be a concerted effort both by government and the terminal operators to encourage export as a policy for sustainability for Nigeria. Terminal operators are also not creating a level playing field for all barge operators. So long as you've been licensed by the Nigerian Port Authority to apply the trade of barge, there shouldn't be restrictions and favoritism by terminal operators. What we see happening today is that some terminal operators are becoming barge operators, where they give undue advantage, which is anti-competitive, okay, to their barge subsidiaries.
To what extent now do you think moves by the NPA to improve access into and also service delivery at the Lagos Port Complex and the Tinkan Island ports, such as the imposed 14-day suspension of export receipts at both ports and all satellite truck packs with effect from March the 22nd this year, yield robust results that would sustainably last? Yes, the suspension is over, but do you think this is enough?
The biggest bottleneck for export in Nigeria is logistics. A couple of years ago, we had cocoa rotting at various jetties, cocoa rotting on the road in trying to access the port. Today, we have not cocoa rotting on the road, but cocoa rotting at jetties because the terminals will not grant you access to bring in the export. And thousands of, if not millions of dollars is being lost Because by the time your export commodity gets into the international market, the quality is not up to standard with what they're expecting from neighboring African countries. Okay, and they don't. The foreign buyers, the global market, they don't recognize these local problems that we're having. So it's the onus and it's the responsibility of both the regulatory authorities, both the terminal operators, to work with all key stakeholders. Look, we need a multimodal approach. So as you're encouraging barge operations to move exports into the port, you should also be encouraging rail to move exports into the port and also the roads to move export into the port. As you are moving the export into the port, most times you're not going to go away empty. If there are imports to be moved out, the imports will be moved out. So there's no need for draconian policies that will hinder certain sectors of the economy. It needs to be a free market. It needs to be a level playing field. And at the end of the day, all stakeholders will find a place to coexist in the system.
Wrapping up our conversation now, let's talk about the future of barge operations and the need for automation of port services in general. We clearly need to remodel the approach to technology application and also look at the conversation around technology transfer.
We should work towards a system where more trucks are encouraged to fly out of Lagos in line with the state government's policy, and that will take the terminals out of the mainstream Lagos. We also see barges moving longer distance. We see an environment where you're going to have specialized barges. We expect that more products beyond containers will start moving on barges, petroleum products and oil and gas, start moving on the waterways. Look, in the US, for instance, about 50 to 60% of the cargo that moves into certain ports go through on the river, on the Mississippi. So we don't see any difference in the environment. We have the River Niger, which is navigable for a significant part of the year. We have the creeks and the lagoons that are also navigable for a significant part of the year. So we also expect and call on the federal government to have a deliberate policy to dredge and make most of the channels more navigable. We expect the water access to locations like Lokoja to be made more navigable, such that you don't have trucks moving all the way from Kano down to Lagos just to deliver exports. These trucks can move from Kano to Lokoja and go back, because you don't have mini ports in Lokoja. You extend the port from Lagos all the way down to Lokoja. You extend the ports from Lagos all the way down to Onitsha. This is the future that I see for the barging industry. I see a future where there will be some kind of consolidation. You're going to have fewer small operators. You have mid-level and big operators. And with this consolidation, there will be capacity that will be improved. I see more collaboration with the government agencies, the MASA, because they will recognize that you need operators to be able to sanitize the system. Barging cannot be taken away from the system anymore. It has come to stay. The only thing that we need to do now is to make it more sustainable and to make it safer, so that everybody will benefit from the process.
Thank you very much for your time on the show today, Edeme Kelekume. We've been speaking with the president of the Barge Operators of Nigeria. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
But just before we go now, here's graphic details of the sectoral distribution of value-added tax for the first quarter of this year. That's it on this edition of Business Week. Many thanks for watching so far. Do enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm David Alabi. Bye for now.